Hello, I'm Luna, an astrologer and tarot reader of over 8 years, and today we're going to be taking a look at Taylor Swift's transits for her engagement with Travis Kelce to see what was going on that led to this awesome event for her and everybody, all of her fans. And if you would like your own personal reading, you can click the link in my description to my store. There is currently a 25% off sale going on. For those of you who ordered within the last week, I'm finishing up that batch of readings by this weekend. So let's take a look at what's going on here. Right now, we're looking at her birth chart. And I actually think, there's been some confusion around her birth time, whether she's a Scorpio rising or a Capricorn rising. And with her most recent engagement, I'm almost certainly sure that she has a Capricorn rising. And this is because the Jupiter transit through her 7th house, so Jupiter in astrology often deals with abundance and growth and celebrations. And Jupiter through the 7th house can be a time where you become engaged, where you enter a relationship, where there is maybe a momentous anniversary. And she has a few other things going on in her chart now that she has indeed met her husband. In astrology, you can actually take a look at the future husband through the 7th house, which is the house of marriage, and Jupiter, which is the husband. This is actually something that I offer. So if you head on over to my store, when you purchase your reading, you can decide what kind of reading you want, if you want a synastry reading or a future spouse reading, etc. And so this is called rectification. Rectification is essentially if you don't really know your birth time, an astrologer will take a look at major life events and kind of take a look at, what transits you were going through and what rising sign best aligns with some of these life events. So looking at her chart, when she got engaged, so she got engaged 2 weeks before it came out, there was a Venus-Jupiter conjunction. So if you take a look at her 7th house, here we're looking at her birth chart in the middle, and then in green, we have the transits that were going on a few days ago. And so with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, this is a very benefic conjunction. It's a very benefic transit, and Venus-Jupiter conjunctions are actually one of the markers that I look for in my future spouse readings. When I'm trying to do your timing, which is something that comes with my future spouse readings, is the timing of meeting your spouse or entering a marriage or an engagement. And one of the most biggest indicators is any sort of benefic transit to your natal Venus from either Jupiter or Venus. And a Venus-Jupiter conjunction is like the most you're getting engaged kind of placement. And in her 7th house, so now that we know, she's very, very likely a Capricorn rising, a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in the 7th house of marriage is textbook celebration, anniversary, engagement type of thing. And it goes beyond that. In that, first off, Cancer is Jupiter's exaltation. So what this means is Jupiter loves to be in Cancer. And so when Jupiter is in Cancer, the themes of harmony and motherhood and family and marriage are enhanced. So this is a year, since Jupiter entered Cancer back in, when was that? I think it was June that Jupiter entered Cancer. Jupiter will remain in Cancer until next year, summer of 2026. This is a time where you're going to see a lot of celebrities getting pregnant, having babies, getting married. Honestly, that's a whole other thing with the Jupiter in her 7th house. And this moon in Cancer, she has the natal moon in Cancer. This is an incredible time for her to be pregnant or to start planning for a child. It wouldn't be surprising that she starts really thinking about marriage and children really seriously during this time. I took a look at her synastry chart with Travis a couple of months ago. You guys can check that out. And I basically explained that she has been in a period of major transition in her love life because she also has this Pluto-Venus conjunction going on, which has been really radically transforming her love life. At the time, I was not sure if this was going to be a radical transition where she enters a period of her life where she really separated herself from needing love as a major center of her life. But now that we're seeing how these transits are developing, it seems like it's much more tied to maybe some commitment issues or fears that she might have had early in life. Considering she has a Venus in Aquarius, and she also has the Northern in Aquarius, they're not conjunct, but they are co-present, which means that a large part of her destiny and her life purpose is obviously tied to art. Venus rules art, but it's also tied to her finding her self-love and really learning about love through meeting all kinds of different people, right, in Aquarius. And most recently, I saw this clip of her when she was much younger, talking about how she didn't want to get married until she was like 35 or something. And that actually really tracks one of the things that a lot of my clients come to me for, and a lot of you guys ask me all the time, is like, am I doomed? Am I never going to find love? Why has love been so slow for me? Why have I struggled, to find love? And a lot of times, Venus in Aquarius, she's also a Saturn-ruled person, meaning she has a Capricorn ascendant. So Saturn is her chart ruler. Saturn governs her life direction and it governs her life themes. And her Venus is in Aquarius, which is traditionally also ruled by Saturn. So Saturn is the time lord. It rules time and it rules maturity. And so for a lot of people, if you have Saturn in your 7th house, Saturn ruling the 7th, the Saturn aspect to Venus. Venus is in a Saturn-ruled sign. Taylor has actually multiple of these. Her Saturn rules her chart, which means that a lot of things in her life will come with age and maturity. And she will also display an unusual amount of maturity early in life. But also her Saturn opposes her descendant. So it makes an aspect of the 7th house of marriage, which inherently delays marriage. And then her Venus is in a Saturn-ruled sign, which also delays marriage. So these are some indicators of like how, you might not be struggling in love, but Saturn may be asking of you in your life path to really master yourself and to, in Taylor's case, she has a Capricorn ascendant, Saturn here in Capricorn in her 1st house. So she's a very serious girl, right? And she's got Pluto in the 10th house, which, really adds an element of ambition and a need to succeed, and to build something of herself. Another Capricorn rising is Ariana Grande. And actually, Ariana Grande and Taylor Swift have a lot in common. They're both Capricorn risings, and they both have this very auspicious and beautiful Moon-Jupiter conjunction, which means that they are master manifestors. And now that we know that Taylor's chart is most likely a Capricorn rising, a Moon-Jupiter conjunction, it's not in her 7th house, but it is conjunct the descendant, indicates actually quite a bit of luck when it comes to finding her husband, because Jupiter is the future spouse indicator, which I'm going to make a second video talking about, how we can take a look at the future spouse for Taylor Swift and see what her chart had to say about it. I wasn't able to make super great predictions in the past because we were a little unsure about whether she was a Scorpio rising or a Capricorn rising. So we were relying most heavily on her aspects rather than house transits. But with the Moon-Jupiter conjunction here in Cancer, she's going through her Jupiter return in the 7th house. And then on the, just a few days out of a Venus-Jupiter conjunction, she gets engaged. That is like textbook anniversary type things. What's interesting about this is that Travis has a Jupiter in Cancer, but he has a Jupiter-Chiron conjunction, which had me a little bit worried back when I was reading their synastry chart, because it indicated that there were some wounds that were being cultivated or worked through here, and I wasn't sure if this was going to manifest as maybe a little bit of hesitance or what's the word? Taylor has been in many relationships in her day, and I'm sure that after the ending of her 6-year relationship with Joe Alwyn, I'm sure that she probably felt a little bit fearful or jaded about, is this too good to be true, right? She's got this Jupiter in Cancer and Jupiter's retrograde, which is another indicator of delays in marriage or multiple marriages. Looking at their synastry, which I'm going to look at again now from the perspective of their most recent engagement and their marriage. But Travis really activates a lot of Taylor's wounding around motherhood, around marriage, around what it means to be, safe and loved, and to be able to fully trust and give into a relationship. And so even though, this is momentous and an incredible experience, I'm sure, for her and obviously all of her fans, I do think that it came with, a lot of hesitance and maybe some working through some major fears, also because she has this Pluto conjunction to Venus. So a Pluto conjunction to Venus, and just the intensity of, the past few years before Travis. I mean, she was in a 6-year relationship with Joe, and then that ended, and then she entered that relationship with, I forgot his name, but the 1975 guy. And that was, quite a tumultuous relationship. And then she put out a massive album, The Tortured Poets, which I believe was about this 1975 man. She was clearly in a period of intense reflection and really, a little bit of that rock bottom feeling, which can come with Pluto, this feeling that everything that you've been building is kind of falling apart, and within like a year or so, she announces the end of a very long-term and pivotal relationship in her life, that she wrote, what was that song, Lover, for Joe, and now Travis recreated that for her. I do think that she went through a little bit of a dark night of the soul, right? A Pluto-Venus transit is not, it's not an easy transit. It indicates that there is some massive upheavals that were coming for her in her love life. And I did kind of feel like she was going to need some time for introspection. But I do think with Travis, they have a sun-moon conjunction, and his Jupiter Chiron is on her moon as well. And both of these are quite healing aspects in the sense that it makes her feel seen, it makes her feel safe in almost a way that could be a little uncomfortable to her. So the other thing that's going on here, beyond the Jupiter transit in her 7th house, which your Jupiter return as a woman is actually a very likely time where you either meet your future spouse, or a time where you start to really recognize the qualities that you're seeking in a partner. So every 12 years, when you go through your Jupiter return as a woman, you experience growth and expansion in your life in some capacity that really allows you to start to really flesh out what it is that you're actually seeking in a long-term partner. And with this Jupiter return, in her 7th house, and Venus is there, and she's in a relationship, and Pluto's on her Venus, this was going to be a time in her life that was going to be really transformative, considering that, now that we know her house placements, a Jupiter transit through the 7th house is a really, really auspicious time. And it's something that it's just such a feel-good transit. Most of the time, even when you're single, Jupiter through the 7th house can bring in really beneficial partnerships, whether they are friendships or just people who feel like your biggest hype man, people who really uplift you and inspire you to do better in life. And what's also really interesting about this is her 7th house, if it's in Cancer, it's ruled by the moon. So the moon becomes her marriage ruler. So she was simultaneously going through a Jupiter transit to the 7th house, which is typically a time of significant growth in relationship sphere. But it was also an aspect to her marriage ruler, which indicates major manifestations in the marriage department. And then also her Jupiter is opposing her natal Saturn, which is her chart ruler. And her Saturn opposes her descendant, which can slow things down. And it's basically what can create delays in marriage. So a Jupiter aspect to Saturn actually can mitigate Saturn's slowness and hesitance. And I do want to say, looking at her birth chart, now that we know that this is her chart, the way that it's actually positioned, I don't know how much of her relationship issues have actually really been about the other person. And I think that it's more self-directed than we may realize. Like, I don't think that Taylor has had quote unquote bad luck in love as much as she's somebody who, is meant to learn through love, grow through love, and there's a desire to seek new experiences in love with her Venus in Aquarius. So I don't think that Taylor is a an example of like a woman who struggled in love as much as she's a woman who a lot of her character development and her sense of like what she's looking for is shaped by the process of looking for a partner. And that's very common, if you have Venus in Aquarius, Saturn in the 7th house, these are typical indicators that you're going to run through major karmic lessons and themes tied to learning through trial and error, like learning through experience, through one-on-one actual encounters and failures. They're not even really failures, but rather experiences that really teach you, and you're being taught through love. And in men, Saturn in the 7th house, is another indicator of a man who could be a bachelor for a long time or who can be married multiple times in their life. What's his name? Johnny Depp has this Saturn in his 7th house, and he has had massive karmic lessons in his life tied to marriage and relationships, because that's where Saturn is teaching him. And Andrew Garfield also has a Saturn in the 7th house. And I believe he's still single. I think he's never been married. So it's a pretty good indicator of bachelorhood. And in women, Saturn in the 7th house can indicate that or Saturn aspecting your Venus, or Venus in a Saturn ruled sign, can indicate that love is something that's really going to teach you a lot about your own maturity and what you will, and your own boundaries and what you're capable of accepting. And for Taylor, with her Venus being co-present with her North Node, love is a really big deal in terms of her finding her purpose, and it inspires her art, right? And another person who has this really prominently placed as well is Lana Del Rey. She also has this Venus North Node conjunction. I believe it's in Taurus, and she also got married much later in life, and love was like a major fuel for the art that she was meant to create in this world, right? So might have to do some research on the Venus North Node conjunction and see if this is a common indicator of maybe some, delays in love, probably because love is directly tied to the soul's evolution when the North Node is in aspect to Venus. Okay, so let me see if there's anything else I wanted to mention about this engagement. She's actually like heading into a time, where she's probably going to be, I do feel like she's going to take a little bit of a step back from the public for some time, mainly because Venus and the North Node is going to enter Aquarius. She's going to go through her nodal return next year, second half of the year, which I do think is a time where she's going to reconnect with that North Node in Aquarius, which is reminiscent of circa, when was that? 2021 through, let's see, it's like 2018 to 2021 when Saturn was in Aquarius. There's going to be repeating themes, which I think was when she was with Joe and she was kind of out of the spotlight for a little bit, because it's aspecting her Aquarian placements again. And the last time that those were aspected, she was really in like a very, very fortuitous time where she like obviously was very inspired, but she needed to take a step back from the public eye to really juice herself back up. So I do think that she's going to go a little bit inward, probably into next year, towards the end of 2026, as the North Node enters Aquarius, as she focuses a lot more on her life purpose and her relationships, in a way that might create some of her best work yet in the years afterward, because the North Node has a lot to do with your legacy. So Pluto also being co-present with her North Node is a major transit. Not everybody goes through a Pluto conjunction to the North Node in their lifetime, but if you do, it means that you are meant to leave a mark on this world. When this happens, obviously Taylor has already made a mark on this world, but I think that there's still more to come from her with this Pluto transit to her North Node that's evolving over the next decade. I think she's really going to be thinking a lot more about like her history or legacy that she wants to leave behind, and she might kind of do something a little bit bigger, or she might even go through a little bit of a rebrand when she comes back you know, if she kind of takes a little bit of a break from the spotlight to focus on her relationship, marriage, children, even with Jupiter in Cancer, even if she doesn't have a child right now, Uranus is entering her 5th house, which is a good indicator of, well, creative inspiration, but it could also be like sudden pregnancy. And she's also going through a Jupiter moon contact and Jupiter in Cancer, which could be a time where at the very least she becomes a lot more conscious of like wanting to have children. And I wouldn't be surprised if she, you know, might kind of unexpectedly become pregnant, or, you know, just suddenly make a big decision to just go for it, right? So that's all I'm seeing here for Taylor. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you guys in the next one.